Jaya Rama Madhava Jai Hari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yasodanandana Bhagavanarandana Ramonati Ramanachani Ramonati Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Swami Prabhupada ki jai, Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki jai, Paramsagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopida Shama Kunda Radha Gidi Govardhan ki jai, Shri Vrindavan ki jai, Navadapdam ki jai, Gang Jamona Tulsi Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Samavata Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Go Premanandi. All glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Guru, and all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschatare Shatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasri Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Read from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 74, Verse 4. Nahi kasya vadvitasya brahmana paramatmanaha karma bir vardate tejo parasate cha yata rave.
Brahmana Paramatmana Karma Vardate Tejo Rasate Sayatarave
Nahe kasya vidiyasya Brahmana Paramatmana
not he indeed ekasya of the one, advitiyasya without a second, Brahmana, absolute truth, Paramatmana, supreme soul, karma be, by activities, avardate, increases, teja, power, parasate, diminishes, sha, and yata, as, rave, of the sun. Translation: but of course the power of the absolute truth, the supreme soul, the primeval one without a second, is neither increased nor diminished by his activities any more than the sun's power is by its movements. Purport. Srila Prabhupada writes in Krishna, your real position is always exalted, exactly like that of the sun, which always remains at the same temperature both during the time of its rising and time of its setting. Although we feel the difference in temperature between the rising and setting sun, the temperature of the sun never changes. You are always transcendently equipoised, and thus you are neither pleased nor disturbed by any condition of material life. You are the Supreme Brahman, personality of Godhead, and for you there are no relativities. Sridhar Swami quotes a similar statement from the Vedic mantras, na karmana vardate no kaniyan. He is not increased by his activities, nor does he become lesser. As explained here by King Yudhisthira, the Lord is one without a second. There is no other entity in his supreme category. And thus, it is simply by his causeless mercy that he agrees to carry out the orders of his pure devotees like Maharaj Yudhisthira. There is certainly no loss of status for the Supreme Personality of Godhead when he thus extends his causeless mercy to his surrendered devotees. Translation: but of course the power of the Absolute Truth, the Supreme Soul, the primeval one without a second, is neither increased nor decreased by his activities any more than the sun's power is by its movements. So here, Yudhisthira makes a very philosophical statement, or a statement of the truth of the Supreme Lord. Of course, he defines him to begin with as one single person, and no one can compare to him. Ekasya advitiyasya. He has no one else, a second person who's of equal status, which means he's supreme. And he is called Brahman and Paramatma. So Brahman also indicates supreme. Conventionally, it can be defined in two ways. That is, impersonal Brahman, we usually take that meaning, but it also refers to Bhagavan, as in the Brahma Sutras, when the first statement is, now it is time to inquire about Brahman, Brahma Jigyasa. And so, of course, Shankaracharya will say, okay, this means impersonal Brahman. But all our acharyas, including Madhva and Ramanuja and Baladeva Jabhusan and Nimbarka, they all say, no, this means Supreme Lord Krishna. It doesn't mean the other Brahman, the impersonal Brahman. And then the reason is given also that if we analyze the word Brahman, the root of the word means to increase and to cause increase. So the Lord is infinite in his powers and his wealth and whatever other qualities he has, and he is the cause of everything else to increase or to manifest or whatever. So that type of description belongs to the Supreme Lord, because he's in the position of the highest power. And of course, Paramatma indicates that the Lord is conscious, but he's also the supreme conscious entity. There are many Atmas, and he is the supreme Atma among all of them. So all of these words indicate the supreme position of Krishna. As the previous verses of Yudhisthira discussed, Krishna is supreme, but sometimes he acts as if he's not supreme. And this is confusing for some people, but one should not make the mistake that therefore he's not the supreme. So therefore he emphasizes here that he is that supreme entity. He is Brahman also. And then he goes on to describe one aspect of him being supreme. And that is, though he does activities, he is neither increased nor decreased. He remains the same. So, of course, increase in one, we can say in one sense is not so bad. The Lord has power, he gets more power. But definitely decrease, he has less power. That would not be very good for the Lord to have less power. So even the increase is criticized because the Lord should be unchanging. So increase is part of the material concept of change. Someone is born, they begin to grow or increase. They mature, then they dwindle, then they die. So increase is associated with change, change is associated with temporary nature of material bodies. So the Supreme Lord is without change. Even the jiva is without change in one sense, avikara. So therefore to increase or decrease would both be considered false. So in that sense the word is used. And particularly with activities. In the material world, we do activities, and when we do activities, we exhaust our strength. We can only do certain activities for a certain length of time, and then we get weak. And then we have to get some nourishment or some rest or whatever, then we get some strength, then we do some more activity. So, activity depletes our energy. In this case, no. We don't get, the Lord does not get depleted by his activity. Whatever he does not make him less after a certain point. For instance, if the Lord creates the material world, then the Lord becomes less after that because he exerted energy to create the material world, so he got weaker. So this is an idea from the material world that we expend energy and we change, we get weaker, but not with the Supreme Lord. So we have the Om Purnamada Purnamidam. The Lord is complete. And even though all things expand from him, including the different avatars, still he is complete in nothing less. Not so with material things. We can expand something, but then the original thing gets less and less and less. So Supreme Lord, no, he can expand himself in unlimited forms, and he remains exactly the same. No decrease at all. So in this way, the Supreme Lord is completely different from material bodies in this world. So another aspect of increasing or decreasing by activities is that by activities in the material world, we want to gain something. So we work and we get money. So the activity gives us something that we want. Not so with the Supreme Lord. He hasn't got anything to attain by activities in the material sense. He doesn't have to do something to get money to eat or whatever like that. And when he's doing his pastimes in the material world, the materialists may think, oh, he's doing this because he's protecting himself in Dwarka in order that he can live comfortably and whatever like that he has a certain purpose in all of these activities to protect his body or whatever. But no, the Supreme Lord doesn't need anything. He doesn't need any protection, doesn't need to have any nourishment or anything. He is completely independent, self-sufficient in all cases. So his activities are not there to increase him in some way, physical way, or even in terms of mentally, that he doesn't do activities in order to get fame or to get position or to feel proud. He has no motive involved in doing activities. Nevertheless, he does activities. So we say, why is he doing activities? And we say, because he wants to be blissful. But then again, that means motive. He's not blissful, and he has to do activities to get blissful. And that looks a little bit strange, because the Lord is always blissful. Huh? So then, why he does all these activities? So this is answered in the Brahma Sutras, that his activities are there not because through that he will get happiness. That will indicate that he's not happy and he's got a motive in his activities. Rather, the activities are an expression of his bliss. So there is no motive involved. So an example, I think Ramanuja Acharya gives the example of a prince that plays ball. So it says the Lord is like that. He plays ball in order to become happy. But then Baladeva Devi says that's not so good because he has a motive in playing ball to become happy. So then he says a better example is the activity of the prince. He's sleeping, and then the sun rises, and then he wakes up. And he gets out of bed and starts dancing. So it's spontaneous. It's not because of any purpose, but it simply expresses his joy. So he says the activities of the Lord are like that, to express his joy. And thus, even the creation of the material world is an expression of the Lord's joy. Everything, of course, what to speak of the pastimes, the spiritual pastimes in Vrindavan or Dwarka or anywhere else, they're expressions of his bliss. So the Lord does activities with no particular motive in terms of gaining something, because he has everything already, but they're expressions of his bliss. So that's the reason. So he doesn't increase his bliss by doing activities, nor does he decrease his energy by doing activities. Not possible. In that sense, the Lord is always unchanging, always the same. But because the Lord is unchanging, that doesn't mean, therefore, he can't do anything, because generally activities we do when a change is created. If the Lord has no change, then he should not do no activities. Yet he's doing activities. So, as I said, the activities are there as intrinsic to the Supreme Lord, but as expressions of his bliss. That's all. So nothing wrong with activities, because he is unchanging in the sense of his bliss and whatever like that. He doesn't have to do anything to gain bliss or anything else. In that sense, he's unchanging. So the Lord is unchanging, but he does activities. So this is another aspect, intrinsic aspect of the Supreme Lord. Of course, they talk about Brahman having no action, niskriya. And Brahman has no activity. Yes, Brahman is in a state where Shaktis are not manifest. But in Bhagavan, the Lord has his Shaktis operating. And through these Shaktis, we get all sorts of different activities taking place. The Supreme Lord does different things, or he causes different things to happen. So activity is intrinsic to the Supreme Lord. So even the jiva is described as being a conscious entity, a knower. He can know things by nature. And that's a karta. He is a bhokta, experiencer. He can experience distress or happiness, etc. That's his nature also. And he's a karta. He does things. So the jiva by nature is also a doer. So that's why the state of Brahman is not very natural for the jiva, because he can't do anything. He can't experience anything, can't know anything. All these things are more or less suppressed. So in the spiritual world, these natural tendencies of the jiva get expression. He can do things, he can be aware of things, he can experience things in relation to Krishna. So therefore, the Lord also naturally has activities as part of his very nature. But no problem for him. Why? Because he has Shaktis who operate for him in a very spontaneous way. So he doesn't have to put forth any effort. He doesn't have to think about anything. The Shaktis automatically do things, and he in no way changes. So we can say that he doesn't change, but change takes place through his Shaktis. So we talk about Brahman being unchangeable. So we can also say Bhagavan also has no change. So when they say, well, what about creating material world? Then the Brahman changes. If everything is Brahman and Brahman manifests the material world, there's change in the Brahman. And the answer is, the change takes place through his Shakti. So material world takes place through the Bahiranga Shakti of the Supreme Lord. Okay, change is there in the Bahiranga Shakti. But the Lord does not change. He remains the same. Similarly, spiritual world, so many things are happening, taking place through his energy. The Lord does not change. He has his Chit Shakti in the spiritual world to do many things, but he doesn't change. His Shakti does it. So, in this way, we can say the Lord is completely unchanged. So in this particular case, Yudhishthira is talking about activity in relation to Krishna and the Pandavas. And the particular activity is he takes orders from them, even though he's the Supreme Lord. So that activity, from the material point of view, from materialist eyes, means that the Lord is not the Lord, because he should be controlling people, not taking orders from people. But that activity does not in any way decrease the Lord at all. That activity, on the other hand, is an expression of the Lord's affection for his devotees. So it does not decrease his position at all. Rather, it establishes his position as being Bhaktavatsala, very affectionate towards his devotees. The opposite, of course, one could say, well, he's just simply serving the Pandavas because he wants to get something out of them. As people do in the material world, they serve someone else in order to get something from them. So he's serving to please them, and then he pleases them, they'll fight for him, and then Krishna will ultimately have them engage in battle, and then the Kurukshetra war will be done. So he's using them for his purposes. That's true in one sense. But again, no, he doesn't have an evil motive behind that of exploiting people for himself. In fact, he asks Arjuna, do you want to fight or not? So he doesn't force Arjuna or trick him into fighting at all. He simply states the facts and let him choose. So he doesn't force anybody or deceive anybody to doing different activities for his own purposes. If they're willing to engage, fine, and they become the instruments of his will. But it is a matter of choice, not a matter of force or deception. The Lord may do activities like this, and it has no deception in it at all, no ulterior motive, but rather it's an expression of his great affection for his devotees. So we know that in affectionate relationships, we have two people, and they don't consider position in that relationship. Of course, the higher and more intense the relationship, the less we consider position. On the lower level, yes, one may consider position and have an affectionate relationship. But the more intimate the relationship of affection becomes, then we don't consider position, whatever like that. So that's so with rasa as well. The more intense the rasa, the less one is inclined to think of position, whatever. However, even there, even with the highest rasa, like Madhurya rasa, some people still think of position, and they put Krishna in a superior position. So therefore, in Dwarka, we have queens in Madhurya rasa, but they also think of Krishna as Supreme Lord. So even there, a position can be manifested even in the highest rasa. So, in Vrindavan, of course, then this is disregarded completely in all the relationships. Even Dasya is without that idea that Krishna is Supreme Lord. So the rasas function perfectly in Vrindavan without any restriction at all in terms of higher or lower or whatever. So in this way, the activities of Krishna go on through his various shaktis to aid the manifestation of rasa and bliss in the spiritual world, and not for any particular material motive of gain or whatever that's associated with material activities. So the activities in the material world have motivation, personal motivation for the self, basically to get things or to avoid suffering. And they all accrue karma. So we get bound up in the world by such activities. The activities of Supreme Lord, and even a jiva in the Supreme Lord and in the spiritual world, are not with any selfish motive at all. Rather, it's out of affection for the other person, not for the self. And no karma is accrued at all. Rather, the opposite. Karma is destroyed by that. And the result is bliss for the devotee, bliss for Krishna. So activities in the spiritual world and the material world are quite different. But we should not condemn activity. We condemn material activity because of the results it gives. But we do not condemn activity in the spiritual world. That is Leela of the Lord. That is a positive factor. Therefore, we have counterparts between material world and spiritual world. We have activity here, we have activity there. We have desire here, we have desire there. But again, different. They're all different. We have affection here, we have affection in the spiritual world, but different. We have rasa in the material world, rasa in the spiritual world, different. We have bliss in the material world, bliss in the spiritual world, but different. So some aspects of the material world are there, and it's like a shadow pattern of what takes place in the spiritual world. So we don't condemn activity, we don't condemn form, we don't condemn rasa, we don't condemn affection or anything. It's there in the spiritual world, but in perfect form. Here in the material world, then it's all subject to problems and suffering, etc. Yeah.
So the Lord doesn't do any activity?
Well, he doesn't exert himself in those activities. So he has all these different shaktis to help him. He doesn't have to think, well, what should I do next? Should I do this or do that? The shaktis start doing things and automatically. Of course, ultimately the shaktis are under his control, but sometimes they act in a very spontaneous way that even Krishna is surprised by a shakti.
Maharaj, I can easily understand in terms of material world, but in terms of in spiritual world or when he's with devotees, because he seems to be doing activities all the time.
Yeah, he's doing activity, but it's not like material activity in which we have material motives, we exert energy, etc., this and that way. So spontaneously the Shaktis are his servants and they act with him. Of course, ultimately it's Krishna's desire, they all act, but they act in very surprising ways sometimes that even Krishna is surprised by them. For instance, when the cowherd boys saw Agasura's mouth open, they said, oh, this is a nice cave. Looks like a snake, but actually it's a cave. And they started running into the cave, or the snake's mouth with all the calves. And Krishna was trying to stop them. And he was calling out to them, but they ran in before, and then he realized, oh, it's my Leela Shakti operating. So the Leela Shakti made them go into the thing without even listening to Krishna.
There is this point that there is no change. Even we have this law of conservation of energy. So which means the energy can never be destroyed.
Yeah.
It can just form.
Yeah.
So that actually is that way aligns with this.
Yeah, similar. Yeah. But here, the little difference is that it changes but doesn't change. So Krishna can transform himself into other things simultaneously. He's still Krishna. So a little different from material energy, which changes into other things. And it's not the same as it was before.
But can you say that in terms of the elements, like the Panchbhuta, they may appear in this form, but actually their nature doesn't change?
Well, they have the element like earth element or something or whatever like that, so that always remains constantly there. But we can say that it expands itself into other forms, and then then later on they all merge back into it or whatever like that.
But we also consider, like on earthly planet, we are having more earthly. Earth is more, but say living entities on these planets. So the nature of the element doesn't actually change, but it's the proportion that...
Proportions, and then accordingly we get different bodies and different lokas and things like that.
You're saying that Lord is always in bliss, his bliss doesn't change, so remains same.
Yeah.
But how to understand that devotees, they do the devotional service or the chant Hare Krishna, whatever, we say that our intention is to please the Lord. Intention is to please the Lord.
Yeah.
He's already in bliss, and how can he please the Lord?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
He's already in the bliss. How can we create again some more bliss in him?
So this is the nature of the Supreme Lord. Yes, he's blissful, but then we can say becomes more blissful by the service of the devotee because it's a show of affection. But then we can also say, well, then he's changed. The bliss has increased. The bliss has increased. So in a sense, we can say, yes, the bliss in the spiritual world is continually increasing in one sense. But simultaneously, it's not, because it's all within the Lord. Even that increase is within the unchanging Lord. It's all part of Him. So already it's there. Already it's increased in one sense. So we can say that maybe another way of saying it is it's manifested as an increase.
It's always there.
But it's always there in the Lord in one sense. Just like we say Krishna's always present in Vrindavan, but we can't see Him now, whatever like that. But it's always there. So when he performs a pastime, then the bliss becomes manifested in a certain way. But ultimately, it's also there in Krishna eternally.
And the person is saying that this material world is like an expression of the joy. And sometimes we see there is a distraction of the material world, and there is a withdrawing. Like creation of the material world. So it's not his in his part that he's changing the joy. When he withdraw the material world, his joy is decreasing. When he again create the material world, his joy is increasing. Again, there is some changes happening.
Yeah. Well, increase or decrease in that sense does not affect the Lord. Destruction and creation of material worlds does not affect the Lord one way or the other. He's doing this because he wants to satisfy the jivas there. At sometimes to become active, so he creates material worlds. At another time they get tired, so he makes them all disappear. They all go back into Mahavishnu and take rest. So he's simply responding to the jivas there. So the joy of creating the material world is a little different from the joy in the spiritual world. It's indirect.
Material world indirect.
Yeah. It's joy in the sense that the material world gives the opportunity for the jivas to get out of the material world and join the Lord in the spiritual world where they get real bliss. So that's the Lord's bliss there, that some jivas get out. And to do that, then he creates the world, destroys the world, creates the world, destroys, and gives the jivas more and more chances to attain the Lord. And that becomes his bliss there.
I think the Bihad Bhagavatam, there is explanation regarding this Lord's increase in the bliss. When this Yadavas are speaking about this, where Krishna is happy more. They are feeling that Krishna is not happy in Dwaraka. He is most happy in Vrindavan.
Yeah.
So how to understand this? That means when he is in Dwaraka, he is not getting full bliss, and when he is in Vrindavan, he was getting full bliss. How to understand this?
It's a little bit relative. He is blissful because he has devotees in that particular mood, and he satisfies them, so therefore he is blissful. But if we take the two Krishnas, the Krishna in Dwarka and the Krishna in Vrindavan, then the Krishna in Vrindavan has a higher type of bliss. So therefore we can say that the Dwarka Krishna more prefers to be in Vrindavan rather than in Dwarka in that sense. But nevertheless, just like we have Vaikuntha forms of the Lord, etc., and those devotees have a certain level of bliss, and they're satisfied with that. And the Lord is also satisfied with that. So it's not that we condemn those forms or anything and say they are inferior or whatever. It's a manifestation of the Lord with a certain amount of bliss, and those devotees are completely satisfied with that. So similarly, the Dwarkavasis are also satisfied with their particular bliss, and the Lord responds to them that way, and he's blissful in that sense. But then in another sense, we compare the two. We say the bliss of Vrindavan is higher, and like that. So therefore, ultimately, that's the Lord's preference in one sense. So he has a separate place for that, Goloka.
It's a little bit difficult to understand, because when you say bliss is different, both are necessary and both are eternal associated with the Lord.
Yeah. But
there is a variation.
Yeah, because jivas are individuals. And individuals means different. They're different because they're individuals. So they have their own perception, their own activities, their own experience, their own likes, their own dislikes. So each jiva is like that. So in the spiritual world, of course, they don't have any material likes and dislikes, but then they have particular preferences on how they want to serve the Lord, what form of the Lord they like, etc., and what type of experience they prefer. And correspondingly, the Lord acts in a particular way, has a particular form for them, and they're very, very satisfied with that. So it's explained there in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Why does the Lord have many forms? Because jivas have so many different expectations of the Lord. So he fulfills all those expectations and takes different forms and does different types of activities for each type of jiva.
The same thing mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita also, that this Lord manifests his form according to the desire of the devotees.
Yeah.
Is it just expectation?
Yeah.
So that means those who are in Dwaraka, they like to have Krishna this four hands Dwaraka form. They are happy with that.
Yeah, they like that form. Or even in Bhagavad Gita, accordingly as you surrender me, I respond to you. What type of bhakti you have, then I respond to that, and I reveal a certain form that corresponds to your type of bhakti or particular rasa.
So we can say that everything is dependent on the jiva then.
Yeah.
His choice.
Yeah.
But the change, the manifestation of change in the Lord, when he expresses different potencies of his powers himself, it is done by his own will, based upon the need of the devotees. Like he appears as Nrsimha for Prahlad. But there is a choice for the Lord to appear as Nrsimha.
Yeah.
There is a change in the manifestation of powers. As Krishna, he shows sweetness more.
Yeah. According to the desires of the different devotees, he manifests different qualities, different forms, different activities.
Taking the form of the Nrsimha, that it was the desire of the Brahma. Brahma wanted that Hiranyakashipu should be killed like this form.
Well, of course, to fulfill the prediction of Brahma, or whatever, and the demand of Hiranyakashipu also, but also to protect Prahlad. He took that very, very ferocious form to kill him.
But it was not the intention of Prahlad that to appear Lord in that form or Nrsimha.
No, he didn't demand any particular form. But the Lord took that form to carry out his activity to protect Prahlad.
But Prahlad had strong faith in the Lord's extending protection.
Yeah. But we don't hear him expecting a particular form. In fact, everybody was surprised when Nrsimhadev burst out of the pillar.
But I think he was worshipping Vishnu, not that Nrsimhadev. He was Vishnu, correct? Vishnu. The Prahlad Maharaj was worshipping Vishnu.
He worshipped Vishnu, yeah. He was worshipping Vishnu, yeah. So everyone was surprised when they saw Nrsimhadev come out.
Another question I have, can we say that for the Lord, Shakti and the Lord is different? Because see, some past time we see that sometimes Lord in Shakti is Shakti is working independently. So it seems that Shakti is working separate from him. That means sometimes Shakti is working, even Krishna is not aware.
Yeah, so the Shaktis are different and non-different from him. Beda Bed. Huh? Even the material Shakti and Jiva Shakti are Beda Bed. Different from the Lord, same as the Lord. So therefore, in one sense, the material world and the Jivas are all the Supreme Lord. They're all one. Simultaneously, they're all different. But it's achintya. How to conceive of it? Achintya.
But the lower material nature can never overpower the spiritual nature, spiritual powers. And so the spiritual powers always overcome the material nature, which doesn't give the Lord...
Well, they're all Shakti. Shakti, because they're Shakti, ultimately they're under the Supreme Lord. In that sense, they're different. But then they're considered Shakti and the Lord are non-different also, simultaneously. Shakti and Shaktiman.